Surprise, October 8th we go live. We ended the month with 12,000 customers on the platform. Or even 1 month, like that 20 days, we had 12,000 customers on the platform.
That was the first spike.
All of a sudden, you see across the globe, SME is a large theme because you realize there is money. There are so many people looking at the same money which can be made from the top. But there's a whole lot of large use case which is just left behind.
A lot of people don't build just because it's not sexy.
So once the UPI came into picture, the payment, the landscape itself underwent a huge change. Like just as a click of a button, quickly do that through the system. It became the first path-breaking thing that India has seen from the payments perspective.
Hey folks, welcome to the show. Today we've got Deena Jacob with us. Deena is the founder and CFO of Open, and prior to this, she's worked and held many different finance hats at Tabzo, where I had the fortune of sharing some time with her as well as Taxi for Sure. Deena, you've got a very, very rich history of doing all of this in some time. So why don't we start off by first just having this conversation about you, trying to understand what you've been doing, how you got up, how did you get into finance, and then how has that journey evolved over time?
Great. Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to have this chat with Edul, and that also makes me go down the memory lane a little bit, think about the profession and the journey I've been on for the last couple of decades right now. So about finance, it has been probably by choice as a profession I took. I'm a chartered accountant by profession, and then started with a typical audit career with Deloitte, and then moved to banking. And I spent, that was a shift from audit to industry. And while at banking with ICICI and Kotak is where I figured out the whole joy of real, where the finance meets the real transaction. And I was really in love with banking, I must say, from the pure finance or accounting part, which I have seen earlier. And then the journey transitioned into investment research and the investment part of it, which I spent some time with a very early stage startup, which was, that was my first brush with the startup, and ended up started as an analyst working on with a sell side analyst on investment research side, writing reports. And that's where I realized this is a fun thing. Like, how do you look at different aspects of finance? During that whole period around 2008 to 7, 8, 9 period was very different times that we saw. So that's where I had the fortune of seeing various aspects of finance itself. Though I chose as a profession, when I studied or when I thought of it, I never thought there are so many aspects to what we call finance itself.
Yeah, I would have never imagined that all of the
other sides, right? And that is where I got more and more intrigued about it. And this is a place which gave me the whole thing of, I love solving problems, and I love solving things which are in and around, like when things are really going gets tough. I really love to solve problems. So, and I enjoyed working on right from implementing balance scorecard in a company, to running innovation for the company, to dealing with on the account management side, on the selling side, which I have also done with ICICI as well on the marketing for SMBs. So I really enjoyed that whole stint of how different businesses function, what are their problems, being, solving, going with a solution for them. Open in 2017, with all of these put together, how Open happened was that I have three of my other co-founders come from the payments background and serial entrepreneurs in the payment and the Fintech space. And we got connected when I was taking care of finance at Taxi for Sure. And we had this unique problem of settlements which could not be done by anyone or anybody in the banking ecosystem, because we wanted to give drivers a real-time settlement onboard and even collection from their end, which can go back to the business system wherever they are. Assume they are in the airport and they want to put in money. How do you recognize, how does the business system recognize he's the one who put money? He'll be going and depositing in a bank, but how does your systems understand? So this was a unique problem, but the banks couldn't solve. They had multiple different color challans we can provide, but imagine teaching 15,000 drivers which color to put and how to put when they are in the airport. And if you want to block them from not doing a transaction, doing a trip after their balance has gone down, there's no other way. You have to give them the solution. So this is an unsolved problem for 5 months. We can see our account receivable from the drivers bulging up. And that's where we got connected to Anish and Mabel, who are my co-founders right now, who came with a brilliant solution with their previous startup, which they were on the fintech side. And we put together, the microfinance connections to virtual account to putting it back into the system. So it was a brilliant solution which just came together and we could go
for
with
just
it.
real-time settlements.
Yeah, real-time settlements. And that's how we got connected. It has been a long, that time onwards, one, it is about the spark of brilliance, what we saw. Somebody who has solved the problem, and there's a team who can just create magic out of things. So that really resonated very well. And we have been connected for some time. In 2017, when we started discussing, all of us have been in the eye of the problem, wherein business problems are there, wherein the business different models and scale, how the banking and other systems are not keeping pace with it. It's not as agile to take care of the need of the changing businesses. So that's when we said, why not technology? Why can't we use technologies to solve this problem? So that was the first part wherein we all came together, where we were in the eye of the problem. There is this thought process behind how do we solve it? And then we got together, let's come together, solve for this issue, wherein business banking is broken for businesses, especially for smaller businesses. They don't have access and tools. They at least need to have 6 to 7 bare minimum interfaces which they have to connect with, right from banking to a PG for the collection, to a POS, to the reconciliations, to invoicing could be a different tool, all the way to accounting could be a totally different tool. And then if you want to make a compliance possible, whether it is a TDS, a GST, it could be a consultant. Along with that, how do you transfer data? Or even if you want to do it, it's a fairly complex interface. How do you do it? So we said, why don't we simplify their life? Because they should be the ones looking at their business and building it. And that's going to be the backbone of the entire economy. Why do you take off their time, 30% to 40% of their time on all this administrative? Because if they don't do this, they cannot take informed decisions and they cannot move the business ahead. So that is how we started off in 2017. How do we put together a platform where it becomes a single interface? You come in and give back time, and not, the money is taken care, give back time to the entrepreneur to take care of business. Right. So that was genesis of Open, and it is a 6.5 year journey right now.
And that's, I mean, tech has evolved a lot, but banking has, not always kept in pace with tech, right? And you seldom hear anyone saying good things about banks from a technology integration and so on and so forth perspective, right? And I think all of us have experienced that from a retail sense as well. But I would love to, spend time with you trying to decode how all of these problems emerge for businesses. And then maybe we can take step by step to figure out what problems they solve. And along this, let's also talk about Open, as to what has been Open doing, how has the journey for Open been over the last 6.5 years as well, and where are you guys now?
Right. So banking, I think historically, banking always took care of the money flow part of it. And for any commerce or a transaction, there are two legs to it, we know. One is the money flow leg, and the second is where what is the underlying transaction, which is where whether you're invoice, whether you are to talk about a PO, an estimate. So anything for basis on which your money movement happens, it could even be an agreement or a contract. But that never comes visible when you only look at the money flow part.
Correct.
Of it.
Just basic reconciliation of what this money came in for.
Exactly.
And what was the good or service paid out. All of that is always
true,
immensely manual.
It is disjoint and immensely manual, because if you want to connect these two, there is no unique identifier on what transaction for which you have given, whether it is an invoice, whether it's an estimate, whether it's a PO, because when the money comes to the bank, it's like multiple tributaries all joining into a river or an ocean kind of, once it is joins, you have no clue from where it came and where it went to. So this has been a unique problem historically. While banking in itself is extremely complex, there were reasons why it was completely separate, regulated, because it's about money, it's about people's wealth and money. So that's where banking system has been separate. And this entire system has been, again, disjoint. And that you can't say banking, it is very difficult when this system evolved separately from the commerce itself for both to be thought through as a single interface. It was never done that way, due to which this evolved completely separately. The systems have been legacy systems continue to be the same way, because whatever happens here somehow was adjusted to what happens on
Correct.
the other side.
Because
whether it's
commerce
true.
cannot stop, right? That will
Exactly,
just continue
commerce
to grow.
cannot stop. It started adapting to what happens here.
Correct.
And then this started evolving in its own pace, actually, and not according to the pace at which the commerce evolved historically, I'm talking about. But this saw a sea change around, I would say around 15, 20 years back onwards, we started seeing sea change in this entire evolution. And when I talk about that evolution, this is right from in India perspective. Let's take the India perspective itself. Payments is the first wherein you have seen fintechs or different entities which came in. I mean, right from the PayPal onwards, if you look at it, right? I mean, from the payment gateways and the cross-border to domestic onwards, payments is where the first level of innovation started happening. A little bit of breakout from the banks, but collaborating alongside on the systems itself, and then trying to look at a different way in which it is evolving. And then it started in India. If you look at it, the primary thing which was put in place, I would say that the whole India stack has been mind blowing.
Of course.
And the whole thing of right from identity, I mean, for a billion plus kind of population and the penetration when you're looking at, and again, educating them, the interfaces, the local complexities, localization complexities you have, all put together, this has been one of the most complex economies to pull off this. So that's where we had to start with the identity.
Correct.
And then you have to start with the consent part of it, and then different infrastructures coming together, the collaboration. So that led to and then once this was in place, especially with the Aadhaar on the identity side, and then again, coming to the consent based, all put together, the stack as it evolved, immediately the UPI came into picture. So once the UPI came into picture, the payment, the landscape itself underwent a huge change, like just as a click of a button, and on multiple things wherein you don't have to memorize, you don't have to have too much of transfer of information, you can just quickly do that through the system. It became the first path-breaking thing that India has seen from the payments perspective.
Correct. And I think people talk a lot about UPI, but the real underscore is the entire identity stack. Where the cost of doing that verification came down from maybe $1,000 to $20-$30, which was insane.
So it all started with the payments. And then it went on to the lending. So the next way we have seen is 15, 16 onwards, we have seen the digital lending coming up. As earlier, it used to be very manual, and the process of identifying right from the KYC to the identifiers, everything has been fairly complex. Thanks to India Stack, again, going back to the fundamentals, it's all about, the foundation was so strong that you could just build on it. And that's where the whole foundation of right from KYC to the different ways in which you can look at the identification. Payments, again, getting more digital, getting more information rich in terms of, understanding what they are into. And come on to GST again, when you look at the other side on implementation of the right from the GST and the technology which has been put in there from a tax and other infrastructure perspective. Think of the amount of data one could get. Technology has played a huge role there as well. So all put together now, when we look at it, it has become like a large ecosystem wherein government is laying all the foundation, partnered by
all the foundational infrastructure
pipes. Then the partnered by regulatory bodies like RBI with the sandbox, the innovation hub, be it, and again from the government and the RBI side on the NPCI kind of initiatives and the setup way in which it is being driven. And the whole collaborative aspects of banks going to the fintech and collaborating as well. Because fintech always was a main factor which led to the kind of distribution and customer experience. The ease of what happens with the customer, thinking from customer with, it has to be happen segment by segment actually. It cannot be like one size fits for all kind of scenario. And that's the exact reason why last 3 years, if you look at it, right, I mean, the largest funding, a lot of funding has gone into the fintech startups. And we have 22 unicorns in India in the fintech itself. So all put together, this shows how critical the fintech, because this has been one area which has been lacking huge disruptive innovation for some time. And we are seeing that, witnessing that phase right now, wherein the traditional banking and the other side, which was disjoint and separate, we see a whole lot of things
merge together.
It's coming to a convergence with technology as the core of it. And then models are evolving around that, which makes it much easier for the individuals and businesses to interact very well with the money movement or the economy, the factors that contribute to the entire economy, I would say. So that's where commerce joining hands with money flow, which again is where, when you look at trends, when we talk about trends like banking as a service, when you talk about trends like embedded finance, it's nothing but these two getting
closer and
embedded
closer and closer
closer
together.
and closer, because the money flow happening at the point where the transaction is happening.
Yeah.
So it is going there, and that is the biggest trend we are seeing right now. And most of the fintech or the new innovations you have seen is bringing this closer and closer, whether it's domestic, whether it's cross border, all of that, how technology can solve for it. And that's one big trend.
Correct. Because I think what over time what has evolved is that as the number of transactions have scaled up, on the user side, the need to merge commerce with banking has also grown. Having said that, at least from an India stack perspective, when you talk about the infrastructure that was laid out mostly for payments, but banks evolved separately. And as a result, now merging them together is the hard job, right? Which is, I'm assuming, what you guys are attempting to do at Open. So let's talk about that journey at Open as well, right? Over the last 6-7 years, how have you guys worked together to get them together? And then what are some of the insights or problems that you've identified? And then maybe we can move and transition and talk a bit more about how, let's say as a business owner, when I start up today, and how my problems are different now as compared to what they were earlier.
So in terms of the banking, look at the whole problems or the banking, the way it has evolved. Initially in 2017, probably when we started approaching banks were equally confused. We were equally confused how to partner with the bank, right? What do we call us? What do we call ourselves? Yes, we have the technology angle and we have the fintech or rather, the financial solution angle as well.
Sometimes it surprises me that 2017 was just 6 years ago. But from a tech perspective and what all was capable perspective, it seems like decades ago.
Decades ago,
right?
True.
Like I still remember having early days of Mudrex, trying to figure out and work with banks and trying to figure out in what formats you can partner. Like nothing existed. Where you are sitting and thinking, how do you build a digital business out of India if this is the state of how banks will work?
If you are an entrepreneur, if you think of starting anything, starting a company, starting a firm, starting your own small business, you have everything in the ecosystem which is beautifully blended there.
Correct.
Access doesn't become a problem. Technology is solving for things. You have specialists and experts who are solving for each of the points, right, from anything that you want to get solved for, including access to capital. And then, the schemes which you have, there are companies which are providing data on schemes, and everything comes together beautifully on their central platform. So far, we never lacked schemes, but I always keep telling the awareness of the schemes. Half of the people don't know this is something which I have access to. This is something which I have the right to go ahead and, claim. And that's also a problem. I mean, and how do you solve for a billion plus nation, right? So those are the things, if you look at it, it is not only banking as such which is getting solved.
The job of the regulator is incredibly difficult.
Incredibly difficult.
Figuring out all of this and also figuring out the roadmap of execution, right?
Right.
With Aadhaar and then UPI and then, of course, peripheral things like BBPS and now moving towards ONDC, the entire stack has evolved to a place where as you said from the start, the entire digital commerce journey is becoming very, very easy.
Very easy. And digital commerce is where we need to get out. While we understand there will be a whole lot of physical touch points, and that would continue to remain. And India, I believe, for the nature of what we are as an economy, will remain phygital for some time. It is not like one day we just wake up and with technology, everybody moves to digital commerce. It doesn't happen. It's a journey, evolving journey. But to get there, I mean, unless you get there, everybody doesn't have a level playing field, for example. But to get there, all of these factors are the foundation. It takes time, but at the same time, the things we were able to achieve in the last 15 years is incredible. Incredible, I would say, for the timeline, and what we achieved is incredible. And that places us as one of the best fintech, or from a finance and banking perspective, one of the best globally, if you see. And there might be, maybe we haven't moved completely towards open banking, but with different things that we are doing, that also is in place. I mean, be it a OCEN or all of that put together with AA, OCEN, all put together. We also have sparks and a good
Correct.
way in which we are getting there.
And a good
when we
enough
talk
like
about digital
roadmap
currency,
also.
digital currency, another one which we can talk about as a government, which has come up with, and the way in which the adoption and things are being looked at within the economy. So I am very bullish about banking evolving, and that's exactly the reason why other countries are also taking and looking at the model and taking, how was this pulled off here? Can we adapt something there as well? But globally, if you see as well, this is where the theme is going to. I mean, embedded finance becomes a huge theme. Branchless banking is becoming a huge theme. I mean, how do you do everything digitally? And if your overarching theme remains, how does commerce and banking come together? Yeah. And that one problem, when you solve for, all of these comes together.
Correct.
Like in wherever you do, however you do, how seamless the transition can. So we started with these two modules, the basic things, which the highest problems which they face in these two modules, from a reconciliation, from multi-system perspective. That is what was the first product all about. Then slowly moved into the ERP. So it took almost 5 years for us to build somewhat, at least in 60 to 70% of the product we envisioned. Correct. It took us 5 years. But did we wait to go to the market for 5 years? No. From the 8th, 9th month onwards, we were in the market. Initially, they were like, then we had to prove out, how do we get customers? Because it's not only that people should know somebody is building some product for us, right? So that's where you have to parallelly perfect which all are the channels which would.
And only then will you also get feedback as to what you're doing is right or not.
Exactly.
Right?
That's how the product evolved, because you can never build product sitting within meeting rooms, right? And that's one thing we have learned also, because the solutions you have thought through in your head, when you show it to the real user, they'll be like, it may be good to have. Yeah. You might be so proud of the feature you built.
Yeah, but
the
they
moment
really
you show
don't
them,
care.
Like, really don't care.
Yeah.
But this is the experience. There might be one small thing which, this is the experience I want, and this is my problem, which solves for my problem. So thinking from what they see, some things might be very tough to pull off in the back end, and that might be the biggest thing you are so proud about. But for the customer, it is a essential which should be there in the back end anyway. Okay. And they don't see it on their face as such, but there might be, related feature which, from a usability perspective, which gives a wow factor for them. So figuring that out is the biggest. And once you have one or two of those hooks, or the way in which the customer appreciates figured out, and there could be nuances on by sector, by the nature of customer, by the complexities, by the size of the customer. So then it gives you a fair idea of how to go to market, through which channels, and what positioning you should give. So unless that happens, more people should hear about you, but at the same time, they should hear the right things about you. Otherwise, the recall will never happen.
Yeah, if you're building a product that doesn't know, then they'll just end up hearing the wrong things about you.
Wrong things. And if you would have ended up building the right product, but you're not positioning, you're not messaging the right way also, because these are the two things which can happen also. So that's the reason why we should never wait for the entire product to be completed for you to go to the market and test out. So this was initially, while we had 500,000 per month digitally acquiring. So our whole concept was like, digitally savvy people is the ones who are going to adopt this. And that was a whole concept. And we said, we'll do digital marketing, absolutely no problem. So it used to be like 500 going to 1,000 per month. And then we were like, yeah, it's working. Maybe 1,000 can go to 1,500. So this is like a 5-6 months we are talking about. Initially, we had a virtual account that we launched with. Okay. But then, these users started telling us, no, the India is still not completely ready for fully digital. Yeah. So you have to still have the checkbook, and full-fledged current account is a need. Correct. So after we started around 14th, 15th month, so around 9th month, 10th month, we got this feedback. Then started on the partnership for full-fledged current account. That's how we went live with ICICI as the first current account, which is connected on the platform by October 2018. Oh. So by then, on month, we were, this is from the user feedback, but month on month, maybe we were at around close to 2,000 per month addition. But October, we still remember when we were about to go live, we said, maybe with the new product, we should have next whole year, we should be able to acquire overall about 20K users, most likely. And that's a good number, because close to 2 we are, and then quality current account customers around 20K. And that was a target we had. And to our surprise, October 8th, we go live. And we ended the month with 12,000 customers on the platform.
Just in 1 month.
Just in one, not even 1 month, like that 20 days, 20 plus days, we had 12,000 customers on the platform.
So that was the first spike.
First spike, we were thinking of this whole number probably for the whole year.
Yeah.
And it just got crashed. And then every month we started seeing, and when we started looking at the people who were coming, connecting, because the connection of the account became very easy. They don't have to go through virtual account, and they can do any transaction. It becomes a easy interface, and there were other things connected to it, invoicing, the payment link which can automatically go, reconciliation, all of that put together. We started seeing a lot of offline businesses coming. Then we were curious. We started asking them, what made you come here? And then what we realized was, though we initially thought it could be e-commerce kind of online savvy merchants, anybody who would have done an internet banking interface, who would have gone through an internet banking interface would have had this problem, and they would still know how to operate. So we had people like, clusters like rice traders, bunch of rice traders. When we speak to them, how we refer to our friends. So on referral, it started working, because once they found it, the entire cluster, they started spreading. Correct. So then we had various, the FMCG, the supply chain guys, a whole lot of construction. There are so many industries which we never thought would started adopting. Then we realized this problem doesn't stop with SME. It's like across business, they have this problem. So that's how the evolution started. And when this started, numbers started coming up. Then we started seeing, more and more banks wanting to even work on the infrastructure itself, and started the partnership, because they started believing in, yes, this could be a good place for us to both acquire and retain customers. And it is not like, a simple current account provision is not what the future is going to look like. Maybe we need to give a full-fledged power pack current account for them. So that's how the journey started evolving. And from that one bank, at that point in time, today we stand with around 19 banks that we have connects upon. And probably, the platform can now be spoken about as an open banking platform.
Yeah.
Because, the
at the scale
bank accounts, they can just connect, and from any bank you can take the data, look at it in the totality. Sometimes we ourselves, with the kind of number of bank accounts we have, we ourselves don't have the full view of what's happening in different accounts, right? So think of it as a single interface which comes, at least even the basic data of what happens where is a huge useful factor to have. So when you look at these small matters also on a day-to-day basis, is a struggle. But you might be told, okay, fine, just connecting the bank account might be just another feature, just another partnership would have gotten that. But from a user's perspective, it is immensely useful. Correct. I would have taken, a lot of time to build probably a PG infrastructure or a card infrastructure, for that matter, or lending infrastructure. But more than all of that, maybe they would say,
just a simple
dashboard might be for the customer which is useful. Yeah. But all others are very critical for us as a means to the end, in terms of giving the customer flexibility, the customer usability part of it, right? The user friendliness, how easily they can interact with different parts of their life itself. I mean, all of these parts are different parts of their life itself. Yeah. How do you interact with that from your finance perspective?
As your job, a key part of your job across all of these different organizations has been partnering with banks, partnering with entities, right? So what's the hack? How do you get those partnerships solved? Because at the end of the day, as you mentioned earlier, the intent on the other end is always there. Right?
Yeah.
So what does it take to move from intent to action when you are wanting to work with these partners?
Total perseverance, I would say. Every time it's about, you have to really invest time, energy, people, everything in there. And it never happens. There are cases wherein we have been speaking for 6.5 to 7 years, even slightly before we started the company itself, and finally the partnership is fructifying now. Always imagine there are thousands of people who are pursuing a partnership with a bank. So you cannot afford to just meet them, say hi, and then after 5 months you go and say hi. That doesn't happen. You have to be constantly in somebody's radar. Okay. To really see what you're doing, give them updates, give them new and also solution along with them, because the intent comes very strongly as a will only when you're able to show them this, what is in it for them. What is your solution actually? How does it pan out in terms of creating a large outcome for them. And banks are not interested in outcomes lesser than, tens and thousands of crores, right? I mean, if you just go with a 200, maybe this will add to a 10 crore revenue, 20 crore revenue.
Doesn't make any difference.
Doesn't make any difference. But either it has to be a customer retention or an acquisition strategy, or this is going to move the needle in a very different way. So how do you solution for that, right? I mean, it is at scale. I mean, it's mad scale at which banks are running at this point in time.
Yeah, you at the end of the day need to get that win-win set up for them. Otherwise, it won't work.
Translate into what you want to have as a result. So that is something which we have, and we're very fortunate to have somebody who had a very good network with the banks, and he was to be complete. I mean, we all are completely involved in it, but at the same time, he was consistent.
You need one person to keep on pushing.
Keep on at least telling that I'm here, we are doing this, we are also doing this whenever there is product updates happening. So it has to be constant interaction which needs to keep going, and that is something which define the way in which we could get.
Although as a company, you guys acquire MSMEs, right? Which are although on the one end thought of from this perspective, okay, these are businesses and different from consumers, but at the end of the day, India is a country of entrepreneurs, right? So everyone is building their own business, and at the end of the day, you're also trying to acquire folks from that perspective. So how has acquisition been different for a company like you? Just so that we can also get some insights into how do you build a business for businesses while doing something like this?
See, for businesses, you should always think of two aspects are the most critical for them. One, and the highest, is always demand generation. Yeah. And the second is about, managing, especially the cash flow.
Correct.
So
basically help them get more money and help them easily manage their money.
Get them more money, easily manage. Because these are the two highest issues if you were to look at it, right? So which is where if you look at it from a fintech perspective also, you can even see models like which is hinges on the primary thing would be demand generation, and then goes into maybe lending or maybe different things which solves for their highest next pain point. It could be working capital management, all of that, right? So that is one theme that you see, or people who solve for their full-fledged cash flow, inflow, outflow, and visualizing in terms of what's happening to take decisions. So this is the way in which we decided to move. And along with that, there is also a demand generation part. For example, we have an app store, which also gives things like, be it a marketplace for the reconciliations, be it we have a market, we have a section called Open Hub, which also is like you can list your products or services and find buyers out of it. But primarily it is on the cash flow backwards. I mean, the management of the entire cash flow that's exactly where we have APIs also for much larger businesses. There are APIs, be it on payout, be it on card or other issuance, be it on lending side. So there are like APIs which we open up as well.
Correct.
And those are the ways in which, where in terms of acquisition, how it changes is a large entity acquisition and the way in which it is being sold to them would be way different from the medium. Would be way different. But when it comes to the long tail, it has to have a product led. You cannot have assisted so much. Whereas when it goes to the other, product led is where you might get them onto the table, but it is definitely one, since it is slightly expensive and needs more solution for them, it might require a little bit more of assisted. So the sales motion everywhere differs actually. And that's where sometimes you also see that there is this sectoral changes which happen. So sector wise, maybe you will have to concentrate more because each segments or each industry's requirement will be way different.
Yeah, like a restaurateur is different and a kirana store is different. Yes. And an individual, let's say a taxi driver
will be different.
Who has a bunch of cabs is different.
That's true. So which is where it typically depends on what product you are in. And the other aspect is as much as possible simplify the product. So that it is like, the journey is so intuitive that to a good extent, they can do it on their own.
Keeping it simple is
keeping
always.
It very simple because when it comes to horizontal, we have always had that issue also. Being horizontal, you have so many touch points and complexities, but we need to keep it very simple at the end of the day. So these two are the aspects we should keep on. It is a journey. I mean, nobody gets it right on day one. And let me be honest about it. And neither would it be. And it's a journey which you have to keep your eyes and ears open, have constant interaction with the customers, look at data, come back and look at data. And that will tell you a whole lot of things which you just have to work on. But that is, you need to triangulate from all sides. Again, cutting out noise from what is a reality, which can happen only when you look back at the data. And that's how you need to then start evolving the product, which is the highest problem that you can infer from all of this. Validate with the customers, start building on it. Otherwise, beyond a point, priority also becomes a problem. You
Correct.
can't have like
What do you
1,000
build
people working.
first?
What do you build first? You can't have 1,000 people building in all directions. You really need to prioritize, have a few things which you solve for, and then go from the essential to good to have. And then innovation as an engine should always run. Else, suddenly you will find one fine day that you are like outdated in the market, and it's going at such speed right now. So that's where in the org itself, you need to have not only from building, but from the sales, everywhere you need to have different layers depending on where and how you are selling. But at the same time, you cannot afford to have too many things running.
Correct.
While all of this, maybe, channels you need to pick. Maybe,
You need to pick your battles while
pick
you're
your
building.
battles while you're building. And what works really well, the channels, everything, the data will show, and the way in which you have done. And also ensure you put the best people before you conclude that this channel is not working, because there's that whole aspect of execution also. If you are one person, wrong person taking in brilliant channel can also get you concluded in 2 months time that this doesn't work or the product doesn't work.
So you guys started with focus on payments for solving problems for MSMEs. How has that landscape evolved now today? As a small business owner today, what all are the I'm not saying options available at Open, but generally as a small business owner, how is my acceptance and of payments changed, and what do people prefer these days? And if you can talk about it from the context of an individual small business owner, that will also be really useful.
See, individual business owners, if you see initially, they always preferred cash.
Correct.
In the initial days when we were, cash was the king and queen and everything actually. But we've seen that evolution happening again, from the UPI penetration to pandemic, all put together. Cash has become, and demonetization also, of course, was a big factor. Cash dealings have come down drastically, which also, looking at the UPI, the volumes which has gone up, you also know how
UPI
things happen. It's
of
crazy
course.
right now. And you go to any length and breadth of any small town, small city, tier 2, the rural areas you say, you still have connectivity and UPI right now, right? So that acceptance has been like huge over a period. So at Open also, we have all the kind of options which we can write from UPI to a card or a full-fledged PG collections, including the bank transfers. Again, bank transfers also can be through the virtually. First, it's a virtual kind of wherein reconciliation is completely taken care. And then you have think of a small merchant who also looks at like multiple QRs they are sitting with today, and there could be multiple POS also. And it's not only for a small merchant, larger merchants also, reconciliation between all of these is also a problem. They have no clue which all transactions got settled, which didn't, how many POS machines, the reconciliation between different of them to have the transactions. But the good part is they started adopting, and that's when these problems started becoming more and more aggravated. Like in the sense, while it was a problem for a few earlier, this has become a problem for everyone right now.
Yeah.
Then we started solving for that also, because how do you aggregate everything again, reconcile from different interfaces, show them this is what you are supposed to get, this is what you got, and how to follow up and set reminders and things like that. Because imagine they don't have the wherewithal to do it that way. You won't believe the kind of numbers that India does, even the smallest of the small. So we had one interesting chat with an ice cream pushcart vendor right in front of our office once, and especially when we were doing our lending part and all, because we had this thesis of some of them are not in the formal economy. There is about anywhere between a 400 to 600 billion SMB loan gap in India, formal access to credit, right? This is insane, but at the same time, the problem is that they don't have the wherewithal to put the data. They have no clue how to put the data together in the structured manner to show somebody.
Apply for
a loan, right? So when we went and spoke to him, he was like, he does 1.5 lakh worth of transactions in a month.
The
1.5 lakh
ice cream pushcart vendor.
One pushcart vendor. And we were like, this is a good guy to whom you can actually lend something, working capital, whatever. And then we asked, how do you take care of your lending need, if at all? That last month I had a problem with, I needed a 5,000. I took 5,000 from the market. I'm paying back 6,500 bucks in a month. I'm like, What? And we keep talking about 26%, 28% ROI being higher, which could essentially be, much lower on the flat pricing. And they are paying like 1,500 in a month for a
Yeah,
5,000 kind
just
of.
for a small loan like
And
that.
we were like, why? Like, no, I needed it that time. And next month I have visibility for cash. I really need that money at that time. So I don't mind paying. So it is not an always all the time problem, but whenever he has, that's the way in which they interact in the market. But imagine if he can be brought into the real formal accessible part. Giving that 5 or 10 to such a guy with his cash flow is definitely not a problem.
Yeah, and it's a life changer for that person also,
Life
right?
changer for the person, because they get more access to, currently they have their known way of solving this problem, but they don't know about the unknown. I mean, what their capabilities are or what they can unlock. That is something which we need to help work with them in terms of, bringing them into the more and more of this formal economy. This can happen only with tech, only and only with tech. And this becomes, think of loan today, we talk about it as term loan, line of credit, you have CZ, you have different products, but all these products are from the nature of what it is. Technically, a loan is supposed to be at any point when you are doing a transaction. If you don't have real cash in your account, can you draw down at that point? That's what you are supposed to do.
Yeah.
So that's how the BNPL got evolved. But in B2B also, we don't see so much of a thing of a BNPL right now. So that is where you can move to. Again, that can only happen only if at the point of transaction, this becomes a third or a fourth option for payment.
Correct.
It can be part, for example, but that should be a part of your checkout page or a payment gateway kind of option than being somewhere else you draw down, club it with what you have and pay. So that's exactly where we need to move to. And this is what we have started working on and started seeing a whole lot of adoption, because the moment it is embedded at the time where they have to do the transaction, you see that the use case is much higher. And we also have this product of which goes like when you are sending an invoice to someone, they can then and there go through the loan journey. If they don't have a lending line, they can set it up if they are eligible and then pay. Right? I mean, that's the way in which things can evolve. Like, you think of how does each transaction get underwritten? How does each transaction gets loaded with the entire checkout page in terms of you have all the capabilities opened up for you, and with this click of a button or just a tap enabled. So that evolution is something which we are seeing. We've seen a lot in the consumer side, but B2B took its own time for whatever reason. But what we see is right at the beginning when people were asking for check printing, all the way now to people asking for more and more ease of payment options. We know India businesses are also changing from cutting checks all the way to we're completely comfortable move to digital and connect to interfaces, payout. So they are asking for the whole fact that
Everyone
they are
is
very
wanting
finicky if the
automations
bulk
now.
upload is not there or a bulk payout is not there, shows they are really shifting to 100% in terms of digital.
So, Deena, continuing to talk about payments, I've personally experienced this as well, that in India over the last decade, the rate at which payments has changed has been incredible. And most of the countries outside India have not caught up. So what are your thoughts? How have things moved? And where is India versus the rest of the world when we talk about payments and finance and fintech?
So if anybody has done a transaction anywhere US, I would always say for everything else, I feel they are at least a decade ahead of the rest of the world. Whereas when it comes to banking, my personal experience has been it is at least 5 years behind. And especially when we compare with the ease with which a consumer or a business can operate in India versus what you see there. While yes, of course, on the payment side, maybe things like Apple Pay, there are various other things which could have moved from a consumer perspective, which could be one touch and easier clicks, all of that. But when it comes to business, it's still very, very, I would say, I wouldn't want to use primitive, somewhere in between primitive and evolved kind of, right? I mean, somewhere in between. They have definitely left from there, but not it reached here kind of. So that way, India has made huge progress. And that's again, I would go back to India stack, because whole lot has been built on the entire layers, which leads all the way up to it. And that's exactly where UPI is a pathbreaker, which is coming as well. But there, the information flow, ease of using the seamlessness of the interfaces that you use in terms of transacting, ease of information, like the time at which you get it, or the convenience. I mean, you might have to wait for even a day to see whether the transaction actually happened, what exactly, whether it's successful or not. So that is not the best of the situation to be in. And those are the things which is very, I mean, surprising for the time and age we are in right now. So that's where India has definitely cracked it, the real time information, how the information flow happens within the banking system itself, despite it being fairly complex even from a domestic perspective. But I would say payments still, the other aspect is international cross-border definitely has a long way to go still. And that while that being said, maybe from a PayPal, Stripe, from PG perspective, there have been things which moved. But when it comes to the interbank movements, it is still like, the seamlessness is
So do you think actually from that perspective, India is still an underbanked or an unbanked country, or do you think that entire notion has changed?
I wouldn't say India is unbanked to a good extent, because those who can be banked, mostly it has, say with the SBI with the 22,000 branches, even with the physical kind of thanks to a whole lot of initiative from the government.
Of course, like it's been 10, 15
Underbanked.
years of progress that has brought it here.
Unbanked is much lesser a problem right now, as much as probably the underbanked kind of, right? So the underbanked also, this is where there's a difference. The key difference between the unbanked and the underbanked also, they don't have access to one, and the other has access to, but
they are not using, or they
they're
don't
not
know how
using
to.
the wherewithal and how, and that is a problem of the user experience, or rather how do they interact. It could be, this is where India has the typical issues of whether the interfaces are easy enough, whether the interfaces are localized enough, because with so many languages and so many, I mean, not only the language problem, but also have the literacy problem also, all put together. How do you make them interact, right? So that is where technology can play a huge role also. How to make it, maybe this is where the new age technologies, even for that matter from a voice based, there are a whole lot of ways in which this can be solved for. And earlier we always had the notion wherein money is always concentrated on the top alone, but the sheer volume, even if it is a 1 rupee kind of opportunity, contributes to a whole lot of. And there is money everywhere, like there is good amount of transaction happening. It's just that with money, if your aggregation is a 4 trillion, you can imagine whether it is in cash or digital, whichever way the split is, there is money to be made from everything. But it is all about how do you solve for it. And that is where the underbanking has to be solved for. And there is still a good option of, remember when we started off on the SME side, there were a lot of people who asked, why do you solve for it? They won't pay. They'll have never, they will never know how to use a internet platform. The volume will be less. But actually, when we went to the market, what we realized is that whether it is a English to a good extent, or if you are just giving at least a Hindi, there are ways in which you can reach out to them. If you just go with a high-end interface with just English and just a few things even on the chat and all, if you are only hell-bent on only English, there are limited ways in which you can make them bang or make them interact.
Yeah, basically they're not willing to pay over there because you're not solving their problem.
Not solving their problem. So there are a whole lot of problems which they're willing to pay also, if you are solving for the right problems. So that is where, the banking, though it has touched people, it has to be touched in a different way. And
so it's not penetrated. It's touched. It's not.
It is touched. So that is where the underbanking problem still has to be solved for. Wherein, if you look at it, that is where the interaction is a very critical thing for people to adopt. And that's where, if you look at it, the banks also are moving to who can help me with that layer of seamless interaction with the customer. And that's the biggest theme again of the bank and the fintech collaboration. And fintechs, mostly the fintechs with whom bank hold hand and work very, very closely, are the ones who are building seamless layers for the areas they want to penetrate more into. Think about the agriculture is still a major part of our economy. And most of it happens in the rural areas. So if you don't solve for it, how does that money and that part comes into picture, right? And that's where when we started having agri-tech coming up, or whether it is, solving for the agricultural, right from technology-based agri products all the way to the agri-financing part of it, we are seeing a whole lot of large companies getting built out. So what if we ignored? So these are the areas where we should go down to the grassroots, figure out where the problems still arise or still exist and solve for it.
Correct. So the underbanked part is the part that we need to solve for, and all of that will get done piece by piece by piece.
The other part is already crowded to a good extent, unless you are in very niche innovations, already crowded.
Correct.
But underbanked and the remaining, which is largely ignored, which is a case with today, for example, SME as a theme has emerged. But if you ask anyone 5 years before, people would be like,
Yeah.
"Who will pay? Why are you even wasting your time on that?" Right? All of a sudden, you see across the globe, SME is a large theme because you realize there is money. There are so many people looking at the same money which can be made from the top. But there's a whole lot of large use case which is just left behind, and it is nobody's baby.
Yeah, maybe I think a lot of people don't build just because it's not sexy.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
It's not perceived as cool.
It's not perceived as cool.
Whereas
right?
there are real problems to be solved.
Real problems and real money to be made.
Right. Let's now switch gears. We've spoken about payments, we've spoken about credit, and as we see, wealth is also now an emerging theme in this entire India stack setup. So how are you seeing wealth and wealth management, etc., change for the country? And a bunch of this started a few years ago with robo advisory. Right. Now we are getting this account aggregator framework that's also poised to change a lot of that. So what are your thoughts?
See, wealth, that's where earlier also we touched upon this, where when there were lesser people looking at, can I underwrite a business, or can I have a say in what they would be going, how they would be going. Now we see, thanks to robo advisory and the fintechs who have brought this will into the youths and across the country. I mean, thanks to Zerodha, Grow, you talk about all the new age ones, and even for that matter, the investment advisors that we have seen traditionally. Even last 10 to 12 years, we have seen a sea shift happening, and last 3 to 4 years, if you look at it, the way India invests itself has changed. Right. Not only in Indian economy, but not only within India, but cross-border as well, right? And in different across assets, the asset classes which they are investing in. So that also has changed. So I would say that though it started from a fintech journey, if you look at it, started with payments, maybe right after India start payments, then lending, and now it's a time of wealth also.
So payments, credit, and now wealth.
Now wealth, because technically, if you look at it, everything on the spend and the transactions happen at one layer. And then you have a point wherein at any point you can have two different scenarios. Either you have a deficit or you have a surplus. And this is where wealth quickly.
So if you've got deficit, you need credit. If you have surplus, you would want to invest.
So, and this sometimes it is not always equal. Like sometimes you will park your credit. I mean, the credit is also a factor of, in the short term, in the long term, what I will make here versus immediate, should I be the opportunity cost of it, right? So this is something which people couldn't, or from a very volume mass perspective, people couldn't comprehend in their day-to-day life. For example, when it is wealth, should I be parking it for long-term, short-term, medium-term, versus should I be leveraging for my short-term, something which yields me 20% over 5 years, versus if I pay some 15% and leverage right now for a 1 year need. So that is something which general public wasn't so much aware of. I mean, we always were like a investment in, say, few asset classes like a gold, property. So these are the ways in which India has been saving. And it is mainly a saving economy, but not an investing as such when it comes to, the general mass. There were very few, even at that point in time, the risk and the portfolio looked like risky, stable, long-term, short-term. But if you look at the general public, that wasn't the case.
Correct. So general public is always as gold and real estate.
Gold and real estate, and probably, and the FD maybe,
of course.
Which is more like hoarding than investing as such. And beyond a point, you realize that it didn't even keep pace with the inflation, for example, right? Or maybe the ornaments, when you have to liquidate, it doesn't have as much of a market as you thought. I mean, it would have gone up 2x, but of course, with all the shaving off you have when you are going to sell, especially if an ornament, you end up getting probably.
An ornament is not an investment at
Not
all.
at all an investment. But India, if you look at it, is not like bars. They're all like exchanges. Everything happen in ornaments and various other things. But that has drastically changed now. Today, if you look at it, capital market investments, the IPO frenzy, especially from the retail side that is happening, these are all great signs of how the mindset itself has shifted, and that too from a generational shift. Like the new generation, how they are thinking about creation of wealth and progress part of it. You don't see so much of just hoarding and saving, versus you see more of investment, the real investment happening. And that is a very good sign. And this is also made possible by technology. How easily that can be done, how much of a transparency and information you get, how much of information based on your decision to invest, where to invest, how to invest. And again, the same things on the leverage, because as much as the lending has also evolved, they're not scared of locking in money. Other things like this is where, from a fintech perspective, you look at insurance penetration again is the smallest in the country, right? And majority of them actually hoard and save for untoward incidents,
for a risky
event, rather than de-risking with anything else. So if you look at it, all of these are coming together very well. And with this information, education, and with the technology solving for giving things right up to them in a platter, telling this is the way you should be doing. And that's where robo-advisory you touched upon. There are a whole lot of things which started making life easier for them to make the decision. And that has shifted the entire mindset.
It's that like the entire access to knowledge has changed.
Exactly.
Access and availability has changed. And that has led to this change in mindset, right? Which is also something that we see at Mudrex while we are investing in crypto. We see a lot of acceptance coming in from people who are not only 20-year-olds, but also 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds, right? Because it's a mindset change that, okay, we are not only looking to hold, but we are also looking to now grow and increase our wealth and become part of this.
I think risk-taking ability across has become higher. And that also has got to do a lot with the technology advancement, the data and information, as you rightly mentioned, and informed decision making. And informed decision making, as well as ease with which they can switch between things. That has, changed the way the new generation. I'm very happy that the generation now that we see are thinking more of long-term and medium-term than the immediate thing of and de-risking situations.
Yeah, I was reading this book very recently called as Against the Gods. It's a book about the history of insurance, right? And I think while reading that, I realized something that from a long-term perspective, or for a lot of cases, people are actually not aware of risk. Like they understand risk really well. What they're averse of or are against is just making loss or being wrong or losing, right? And what has happened is that I think as access has increased, people have been given those choices and the ability to participate in these different things. That has also changed their perspective about what risk is and what are they comfortable with and what are they not, right?
It's very true.
Yeah. So on that note, how do you personally invest, Deena? Like what does your portfolio look
So
like?
I'm generally a risk taker. So at the same time, I'll go with the heart, and I don't believe in my lightest and the smallest would be FTs. The rest, I have startup investments. Yes, I do, but at the same time, it is more about the team and the idea, and I haven't been looking too much at it. It is more from the heart, I would say, than thinking too much.
So like a gut feel whether this
will work or not. And then, of course, capital markets I look at, and then real estate is another. I still go by, because that I believe if you do it right, it can beat inflation to a great extent. But that you should be looking at the right space. Where the dearth of space would be there at some point. That's the only way you can look at it. And it's a diverse portfolio. But yes, what I don't do much is for the safety part of it, which is both good and bad. But I think, each person's investment philosophy has to be very tailor-made to
extremely
personalized, because you should never go into uncomfortable territories for sure. And you should have your own thesis about things. And without that, it is very difficult. Nobody can advise you on what you want. And you have to be the best judge in terms of how much of a risk you're willing to take, how long you're willing to wait, and what your priorities are in the short term versus long term.
Yeah, people can only advise you in how can you best achieve what you want to do. But you need to know what you want to do.
Know what you want to do.
Great. So, as we move into this last part, let's just spend some more time learning and getting to know a bit about you, right? So, what are some perspectives or thoughts or learnings that mentally for you have changed over the last 10, 15 years as you've built for first consumers with Taxi for Sure and Tabzo, touching upon millions and millions of consumers there, to now building for businesses. So what perspectives or ideologies have changed for you in that front?
So I would say that ideologies and perspectives which has remained the same rather than changed, I would say, because the commonalities are remain passionate to the problem you are solving. Otherwise, you can never solve that problem. Second is always, you have to have the customer first. For whichever segment, know your customer really well and that segment really well. Like within that broad segment also, there will be a certain, because you can't solve for everyone in the same segment when you look at it also. So you really need to see who is that target you are and know them very well, know the problems very well, build along with them. And this has remained the same whether it is B2B or a B2C for that matter. And then create simple products, message it very simply. And like simple products in the sense of sometimes product itself can get complex. When we were doing Tabzo, we had that messaging needs to be what is in it for you. That's all it matters to the consumer at the end of the day. And that needs to be very crisp and bang on. So this remained the same. And this, while I'm talking about all of these, I've had challenges everywhere in achieving this. And these are very, the sentences are very small, but to achieve that, the depth of it
and it
is
sounds
next
so
level.
obvious, like this is what you do by default, right? But when you actually start
doing it, it's not easy at all. And this is where people, teams, companies, everybody struggle with. And I've also had same struggle, whether it is B2C or whether it is B2B, we had the same struggle. But that's an evolution. Then only way is like, keep your eyes and ears very close to your customer, solve along with them. They will teach you things. Learn. Be open to learn from them. Ask them before building.
Great. Then let's talk. I've seen you read quite a bit of books, and I've seen that bookstore and library at your house. What are some of the recent books that you've been reading? What are some of the books that you've loved in the past and would recommend to people?
See, I am a person of simplicity. So one thing which has kept me very, very motivated, because as an entrepreneur, there are days when you actually doubt yourself. You are like, really, are you onto what you have to other, are you making an impact? What exactly you should be taking the path? So two books which has really helped me are like small little books, but which was highly motivating. And whenever I feel dejected, I go back and read them still. And those are Jonathan Livingston Seagull and The Little Prince. So two of them. So one gives you the perspective, the different perspectives that you have in your head, how others can't see it at all. But if you believe in it and if you have a different way in which you can look at things, there are ways in which you can turn around. The other one is when people say you can't. Do you have it deep within in you and you can push through?
It comes back to perseverance, right? Like what we were talking about earlier.
Back to perseverance completely. So I think, anybody who is looking at startup entrepreneurship, keep it very simple, but have 2 or 3 anchor things which you can go back to. And rest of it will be, I think, as you evolve. Recently, I read a combination of books, not only on the on leadership. Maybe there are times when you solve for certain things, you start reading that. There are times when you really want to have a different perspective. So recently, another book which I read was The Covenant of Water, which is nothing related to business, but has been a brilliantly written book. And that also talks a lot about the place where I come from and different perspectives. And that I really loved. That was the recent one which I finished reading, which also comes from, I love art, I love creativity, I love environment. So all put together, this was actually recommended by an architect friend, and I loved it. And sometimes I feel we all need to take a break from all the business thinking we are doing. Yeah. We need to go back and look at some things which gives us real joy in life. Real joy in life in the sense something which is slightly different from what you do. Otherwise, fatigue can also come in if you just think and breathe only what you are doing. Of course, we enjoy that, but at the same time, after the break, when you come back, your brain itself works different.
Right. So you're talking about joys and pleasures. What's the one experience or purchase that you did recently, let's say below 10,000 rupees that you really, really enjoyed and you would highly recommend?
I got one small wind chime from Auroville recently, and that every time I hear the small, little, tiny, lovely sound that it makes, I'm like, this is an investment I really loved, enjoyed. Probably a 2K, but these are the simple joys of life.
Excellent.
Yeah.
It was great having you, Deena, on this conversation. Is there anything else that you would want to cover or you would want to tell the audience today?
I think, yeah, always it's not an advice, but something which comes from my heart. I keep telling people, no matter what people say, follow your heart. And you just have to go do what you feel like doing.
Correct.
And don't listen too much to the naysayers. Naysayers also help you progress, because at that point in time, you should say, I really have to prove. And the moment you follow your heart, things will fall in place. That's only one thing I want to leave everyone with.
Great. All right, folks. So don't listen to the naysayers. Keep on doing what your heart does and persevere. That's the advice that we have from Deena today. Thanks a lot, Deena.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.